Not to scare anybody, but I think it's just important to do what you can right now while we have the time and we have the intellectual capacity to be able to facilitate change the way that we want it. One day we're all going to wake up, or one of us, we're going to wake up and we're going to realize that we have a lot of tasks to do and lots of things to do, but there's things that we're not going to finish, and we need to enjoy life because that might be our last day.
We think what we know is really of value, so we try to teach that to our children. What they teach their children is how to hire and fire.
Once you start turning 30, 40, those kind of ages, you feel some of the weight of your body. Instead of when you're 20, you can wake up after partying all night and go do whatever job you have to do, and it wasn't a big deal. You can go work out, do the same thing every night.
I don't think I'm going to live to be 30, but what if I live to be 100?
Each person is obviously unique, and that's why I do personalized medicine is what I call it.
Let me kick it off with the first question. So if you could go back and give your younger self advice, what would it be? Welcome to today's PlanAssist Podcast. Today we have a super exciting guest. But before I get into it, those of you who listen to the podcast, this is a podcast to help you make specifically better financial decisions, but also just better decisions in general. And what I do is I interview successful people in the area, and we always started off with the same exact question is what would you do if you could give your younger self financial advice? And today I have a super exciting guest, Brian Silva. So he's CEO and co-founder of GymRx. Brian is a board-certified physician associate with a background in military medicine and nearly 2 decades of clinical experience. His work today is focused on different approach to health, moving beyond treating just symptoms, but looking for the root causes of them. At GymRx, he works with individuals who want to improve their performance, restore balance, and take more control over their long-term health. Brian brings a unique perspective that combines a real-world experience, discipline, and focus to measurable results. So with that, do you want to add anything to that, Brian? Did I miss anything?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Nice to see you. Hopefully I get to meet you around the area, but yeah, Brian Silva. And I was in the military for about 17 years as a pararescueman. So had quite a few deployments doing that. And I've also done vascular surgery. I've done the aesthetics medicine. So I've done a lot of different types of medicine. And, this type of medicine that we're going to talk about here in a little bit is one of the, all the things that I've done in the past integrated into today's technology and the opportunities that we have today. So I'll be talking a little bit more about that in just a bit.
That's fantastic. That's exciting. And when did you get out of the service?
I retired in 2022.
Okay. So you're 4 or 5 years in, you're still kind of finding your way, and you have 5 children. So your life's busy.
Yeah, definitely. 5 children. They're 10 and under. So the youngest one was born in August of last year.
And you live specifically in Claremont. Where do you live specifically?
I like to be out in the country. So I live out in Groveland.
Okay.
Here, but yeah.
Nice.
Quiet.
But Claremont's Claremont's kind of the center, but it's growing all around that Mineola, Claremont, Groveland, all just exploding.
Yeah, I've only been here, I think it's, a little over a year and a half now. I retired out of Utah, and I'm not really from anywhere. I joined the military when I was 19, and we moved a couple of times before I joined the military. So, I like to continue exploring different places and just checking it out. When I came down here a couple of years ago with one of my mentors, he showed me the area, and everyone seemed really awesome, easy to talk to, laid back, and, the kind of people that I like to hang out with. So that's why me and my family moved down here and started this business.
That's fantastic. So, and you do have a co-founder I saw on your website. So there's 2 of you doing it.
Yeah. So the other guy, he was actually my previous patient. His name is Sam Alloway, and his background is more in the business consulting world. So he did that for 20 plus years and recently quit that job, working full time on this just based off of his experience working with me. He really believes in, everything that I've put out and helped him with, and everything that he's seen me work on patients with, and just, the results are undeniable, and the ability for him to be able to take part in that rather than just business consulting, because everyone wants money, of course. That's one of the things, and, it's a financial podcast, but more important is the effect that you have on the people that are around you especially to me and to my business partner and co-founder. That's what we want to see, is have an impact on my community and everyone that I have a conversation with. Hopefully you leave better having talked to me, or me having talked to you. I always learn stuff from all my patients too. So that's the other part that I wanted to bring to the equation with medicine is, oftentimes you don't get a voice when you're in the patient treatment room. So that's one of the key things that I do is, listen and then actually implement the things that are going to make a difference for you based off of what you say during the interview.
But that sounds like a really good combination. So he has business consulting. So he kind of gives you the business kind of into it. And then you have kind of the experience with the clients, and probably the combination of you, the two of you do have, sounds like could have really good synergy.
Yeah, exactly. This is my fourth business that I've started. So I have some experience starting up
Oh,
different
okay.
businesses, but he definitely brings it to a different level, because what he was working on with business consulting was, in the multi-million-dollar type arena, whereas, where I was at with online businesses and YouTube and those kind of things. I mean, you can see my microphone. So I've done a couple podcasts before, my own podcasts, and he brings a different level of maturity to the business aspect.
Well, and I'll get into the question, but I don't want to kind of pause the conversation. But one of the things that I find is when we have these solo practices, which for those of you who don't know, I'm Tim Clifford. I'm a certified financial planner. I have a small investment practice here in Winter Garden. And one of the things that I find as a solo practitioner, as a solo business, is I don't have anyone to just run some of the stuff past. It's not that I don't know necessarily the answer, because some things don't have an answer. They just have two or three options, and then you just have to pick which one's the best, right? So having someone else to kind of run that past you sometimes can make a difference in helping you work through those options, is maybe the best way. It's not that someone gives you the answer, it's someone gives you a better perspective of the different options.
Exactly. And that's one of the hardest parts for me is, I've been in medicine for over 20 years now total. A lot of it was as a paramedic, and then, like I said, multiple different arenas in medicine afterward. But, one of the biggest things that we do in especially the big hospital setting or even primary care is we get different people's opinions on what this person may or may not have. So having a separate perspective, look at the problem rather than just, the thing that you have in front of you, definitely gives you a better way to facilitate the best option, whatever it may be. But obviously that can be confounding once it gets too big. So that's, the line that we toe whenever we're in business.
Exactly. And like I said, sometimes there's no good options. Sometimes there's a lot of good options, right? Sometimes you're going good to great, or sometimes you're going bad to kind of not quite as bad.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
depends on the situation, right? And that's true in financial decisions as well. So it's kind of true in life. It's not just true in kind of one area. So it's how do you make better decisions? So with that, let me kick it off with the first question. So if you could go back, Brian, and give yourself not financial advice, just any kind of advice, go back and give your younger self advice, what would it be?
Yeah, I thought about that since you reached out and you told me that was going to be a question. So I've kind of been just mulling it over in my head on what I would do. And it's not necessarily financial advice. If I were to give
No,
myself
it doesn't
financial,
have to be
if it
financial
was
advice.
financial, it would be like invest in Apple, Google, and all the AIs. That would be
Exactly.
an easy,
Right.
fix on the finance part. But I would say, when I was growing up, I was a pretty shy guy. I didn't like speaking out about my opinions or talking about the things that I knew really well, even. And I have had a pretty awesome life. Like I said, all the kids, all the deployments. I mean, I've traveled everywhere around the world with my job in special operations and this job. So I've been pretty lucky to do all that stuff. But I didn't build and create things that I would see as the legacy formatting things, because my parents, we didn't grow up with a lot of money at all or anything like that. So I kind of expected that for myself, and I wish that if I could go back and tell my younger self, I'd tell myself to speak up, build the things that are going to lead you to your future. I'm not talking about like wealth. I'm talking about your intellect, your family's, just what your family believes in, things that actually form a legacy within your family. And all the ideas that I've had over the years, document them, because I was terrible at taking pictures. I didn't want to be that guy that was, we were jumping out of planes or whatever we were doing and taking a picture of myself because I kind of felt embarrassed about it. But that's the other thing is don't care about what other people think, because at the end of the day, if I had cool pictures like that of myself doing all these cool things that I did back in the day, then, I think it'd be awesome to be able to show my kids. But I didn't do that for myself because, it was my own protection mechanism back in the day. So it would be, and the last part is that due to the nature of my job, I didn't really think that I was going to live past 30. So I had resigned myself to that thinking, which can be good. Obviously, everyone says, live like there's no tomorrow, but I would keep that somewhat, but also plan to live to 100 at the same time. So set yourself up for success, because here I am 40 plus years old, and I think it's an awesome life that we have, and the opportunity for us to grow and for us to create things that we want to create is better than it's ever been in the, I guess, span of human history, as far as I've read, with AI and with computers, and just the ability for us to connect like we are right now through a screen. So it's a pretty awesome time. So that's what I would tell myself.
That's fantastic. Think of what that 2 minute clip would be of 100 of those pictures. You know what I mean? Talk about building, talk about a introduction of jumping out of planes, doing all the stuff you've done,
Yeah.
having just little 3-second clips of all those things would just be incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm going to kind of build off some of the questions you make and just kind of comment on the financial aspects of it, or at least the how do you build wealth or maintain wealth is one of the things you touched on. Charlie Munger talks about all the time in all of his interviews, who was the co-CEO of Berkshire Hathaway.
Mhm.
And in one of the Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholder meetings, someone asked him, what was the biggest lesson you learned? And with no hesitation, he said, I learned to invert everything. And what he meant by that was kind of take worst case scenario as well as best case scenario, and then build that into the plan. And how he came up with that, he was also in the Army, and he was a weatherman. And his job was to give the pilots the weather. And he realized at 20 years old that giving the pilots good news or good information, the skies are blue, there's no winds, etc., didn't add much value to their lives. What added value was there's winds, there's low clouds, there's thunderstorms coming in, etc. And his point was he took that lesson into his real estate career, and then ultimately into his Berkshire Hathaway career. And he used it all of in investing, and he kind of did what you just said was, okay, I don't think I'm going to live to be 30, but what if I live to be 100, right? And in the financial services world, we have a tendency to make everything over rosy. Like if you're going to invest in something, well, why would you do it if you thought it could go down, right? I mean, you're not doing it because you think it's not going to work, but you actually need to approach it as though, what if it doesn't work? And if you do that, then you invest accordingly and not with over emphasis on it working. And then if it does work, great. If it doesn't work, you're still fine. Either way, it's kind of what you just said is 30, 100, plan for both.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that, I've identified with my own practice. Obviously, health and finance both are investments. And that's, the way that I see GymRx. And when I see patients, we're talking about people that are 35 to 55 plus. And it's harder to course correct, going with the airplane analogy. If you've gone off in a far distance for too long, in the wrong distance, or the wrong direction, to course correct back to where you want it to be. So that's definitely something that I recommend with a lot of people, especially that are my age now. We're becoming a little bit more conscious. Once you start turning 30, 40, those kind of ages, you feel some of the weight of your body, instead of when you're 20, you can wake up after partying all night and go do whatever job you have to do, and it wasn't a big deal. You can go work out, do the same thing every night, and it wasn't too big of a deal. But now it catches up to you, and you start to think that you should have planned ahead. And some of these kids nowadays that I've been seeing in their 20s, they're definitely taking this into account. All the people that are millennials and in my era are telling them, hey, you should start taking care of your body right now. So they stop drinking alcohol and stop doing a lot of these things for, I'm sure people see on social media, like they're doing all these drugs or they're doing whatever, but the people that I see that are in their 20s, they're actually starting to take care of their health a lot more than what, my cohort was back in the day. So I see a little bit more of that planning aspect to some of the younger population, but for the people who are my age or older, it's definitely something that we need to work on, because we were taught that regular food pyramid, which is obviously now if you've seen, they've inverted the food pyramid and then put protein on top and then, carbs and everything else on the bottom. And, my group didn't really get taught about fitness and how to stay fit and how to eat correctly, those kind of things. And now again, with AI and, some of the computer programs out there, you have the ability to literally plan your entire meal for the rest of your life if you want to. And it's pretty awesome that people have those kind of tools to be able to plan their life out and help them with their health.
So what do you see as some of the biggest, and I'll follow up with two questions. So what do you see as some of the biggest challenges? And then what do you see as some of the biggest opportunities, kind of the combination of those two for, kind of that typical middle-aged person?
So yeah, there's a few challenges that people run into. First, and the most important one, is the limiting beliefs that they've held themselves to in the past, or thinking that the way that they have been living their life for the last 40 years is going to bring them into the next 40 years with the same amount of energy and vitality. So, obviously that takes a little bit of introspection to be able to overcome some of those limiting beliefs of, even if it's like, oh, it's okay to drink alcohol once a week, or I've been doing this for the past whatever. I always have my snacks at night. I always have my whatever it is that's the comfort thing that you've always had, even if it's like a drive-through. And the weight of you trying to make those decisions is literally turning into weight that you're actually carrying, because you continue to do those things that you've done forever. So it's changing those beliefs and the way that you're living your life. And then on the other side of the coin, it would be, well, what do I listen to now? Because this person's telling me that eggs are bad. This other person's telling me that, if I start running or have too much impact on my joints, then it's going to hurt me. And then you can, again, put a lot of stuff into AI or look on social media. And some people are telling you need to eat beans. Some people are telling you beans are bad for you because it's a higher FODMAP, or you have to increase your fiber. But what do you actually need for your body? And, those are obviously somewhere in between there is where you need to be. And the biggest thing is having a clinician and having testing. It doesn't have to be me, but it has to be you being able to test before and after, and then subsequent, based on whatever changes you made to, if it's a peptide, it's a hormone, it's a sleep schedule, some kind of habit that you changed. How does that move the needle with your body? And is it effective? So each person is obviously unique. And that's why, I do personalized medicine is what I call it. And, to further enhance that, it's called resilience medicine, because I want to build resilience so you can lead into your 80s, 90s and be able to do all the things that you want to do, including going upstairs, carrying out the trash, all the important things for your body. So we do that with, multiple genetic testing as well as nutrient testing. So we place all the things that your body needs in order to carry you into the future. So it's really, going back to your question, figuring out what things you need to let go and what things you need to bring in from the other side of the mess of things that people are telling you should do. So that's kind of how I see the biggest
It's so interesting though, because I literally wrote a book on growing and maintaining wealth. And I looked based on all my experiences as in the business, which I started out at 20 years old. So I've worked with basically people who have wealth my whole entire life. And I identified, what is it that people that have wealth do that's different than people that don't? And I identified three things, and you kind of touch on them, but I'll kind of go into a little bit, is people who have and maintain wealth, they have a plan. And I'm not talking like a 60-page PDF document. I'm just talking, they kind of know where they're at and they're very self-aware of where they're at. So they don't kind of kid around, here's where I'm at, and then they know where they want to go, whether that's in the next month, 2 months, 10 years, some number, but they have some plan with some action items in the middle. The second thing is they're diversified in the sense of they have multiple income streams. They have all, assets kind of around different places. And then the third, those first two are not that hard to do, to be honest with you. They're pretty objective, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing is kind of true with what you just said. The third one is the hardest, and that is seeking counsel. And what I find is people, and I'm sure you find the same thing with health, and it goes to your point about what do you listen to, or what information do you gather? And people who have accumulated wealth, they're very, very comfortable asking questions. Like almost, they don't even know it. It's very almost second nature to them. Like they're almost in what I would call seek. They're curious. You know what I mean? So they don't really like. They have no problem calling you up and saying, "What do you think?" And you say you need to do this and this and this, and they'll with no guilt, with no burden of yes or no. They'll just say yes or no, and then they'll take that information and talk to two or three other people, and then they'll come up with their view on health. They'll come up with their view on investments. They'll come up with their view on kind of everything. That's the way that they do it, right? And people who have struggled with building wealth, they're not that comfortable asking questions. I don't know if it's a confidence thing or what it is. And then when they do ask questions, they go on these like I'm probably using the wrong word, but it's probably guilt trip, right? They go on the word. The reason they don't want to ask someone what they think is because then they get a feeling that they need to follow that advice. It's either I have to yes or I no, right? So if I ask 10 people, all of a sudden I'm gonna, tell 10 people no or yes or something like that. Well, people with wealth, they don't think like that. They don't say yes or no. They just take your information. It's why really successful people, even someone as healthy as you, I'll bet you fall into this category in the health category is if you ask them who told them something, they can almost never tell you who it was because they ask so many people, right? They can't give someone credit for a particular success in their lives, even though they'd be happy to do it if they actually knew who it was. They just don't know
Yeah.
because when they're making a decision, they might talk to 5 or 6 or 7 people. And it's not that they take any one of those people's advice, it's the combination of them. And I think that's the biggest skill set that people have to get. They have to learn that with AI because AI is going to cause a massive challenge. Like you could kind of get along without that curiosity skill set prior to AI. With AI, you better be really, really curious.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good framing for what I just kind of talked about, and that's something that actually we're going through with my daughter right now. She's 10 and she's homeschooled, and she loves to write. So she said, "I'm going to be an author when I grow up," and she's already writing a book right now. It's a fiction book, and it's honestly it's really awesome. Like she reads probably a book a day since she was 6, but we're introducing her to AI, and she kind of got in there and cheated a little bit. She's trying to create characters for her story, and she's like, "Give me 5 different characters or whatever." And we stopped her from doing that and we made her write another essay about why agency is important, because I think that's something that we were never really taught was the idea of what agency is. So we told her, we want you to write, and we love your writing the way that it is. Your ideas are awesome and individual, and you are the person that creates it, not AI, not anything else. It can help you get to ideas faster and get to story, plot line, all that kind of stuff. Make sure it makes sense and pre-read it for you, and do all that kind of editing stuff. But the ideas are yours, and that's what you really need to have. So anyway, I think that is something that we really didn't have as much of a mirror in our faces about until AI came in, because you can
That's
type
right.
everything and you can say, write me a book about whatever, and it'll write you however many pages, 30, 40 pages of a book about
Yeah,
these
whatever.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah. But it's not really your original idea, because if you publish that book and someone's like, "Hey, why don't you come on and talk about your book?" And then they're going to ask you questions about your book and you have no idea what it's about.
right.
But on the health front, I absolutely love patients that come in and ask me questions about their health. And that's definitely what I find in the people that are successful, is that once they invest in something, they continue to follow through and pull that thread on, okay, well, how much further do I need to go on this? And then maybe they, pull a little too far. And they're like, okay, well, that looks like a good point to start. But it's the agency requires them to intake new ideas and then decide whether or not the previously held idea is something that they want to hold on to, or if this new idea is better. And if they have the framework, like you were saying, of 4 to 5 different data points that point towards one direction, it's like Colin Powell used to say, you only need 70. If you get up to 70% or more before you make a decision, then you've got too much information. 30% is like the lowest bar for you to be able to make a decision as comfortably as possible. But I think that's the other thing that successful people do, is they don't sit there and dwell on the situation, or they give at least as much time as is necessary to make that decision and do
That's
the
right.
investigatory aspect of things in order to make a decision, rather than just impulsive, but they make a decision and they don't just sit there in analysis paralysis trying to figure out, should I or shouldn't I do that? And then a week or two passes and then they completely forget about whatever. And that's what I see in, people that are less successful. So it is definitely a fine line of being able to do that and being able to be resilient enough to firmly believe in what you believe and be able to explain those things, but also be able to take in new information and listen to other people's perspective and then, apply that to your life or not, but be able to decide whether it is applicable.
Right. I mean, and I tell clients all the time, no decision is a decision. You've made a decision, right?
Yeah.
So now you need to understand and be completely, again, self-aware and honest with yourself about, the decision was made to do nothing. And that's sometimes the right answer, but you need to do it consciously, not just flippantly, right? And it kind of does go back to AI. What I think is going to happen, and this will set you up for the question I'm going to follow up with you because I'm curious what you think, but I'm going to give you my opinion first. What I'll talk to advisors that'll say they don't want clients to use AI because they don't know what they're doing. I actually welcome it. Because I want them to be curious. Those are my best clients. My clients that have done some education, that have gone through and looked at their different options. I can totally get on board with. I can help them identify and get those options down to one or two answers. And I rarely say this is the answer because it's usually not. It's usually one, two, three things you need to do or could do either, and then you make a decision, then you move forward and adjust accordingly, right? Yep. So what I think is going to happen in the next 5 years, and I was part of the internet boom. So I'm old enough to remember kind of the 90s. And one of the things that I am finding is those of us who are older are, from a money perspective, right? Not from a business perspective, et cetera, but from a money perspective, we're all in on AI. Okay, we're like, if you look at our portfolios, you look at our investments, you look at anything about you look at our businesses, lots of people that are my age are all in. I'll talk to the 40-year-olds, they're really not. Okay, they're kind of still on the edge and kind of looking inside out. They'll say, yeah, I use it. And you say, well, what do you do with it? And they basically use it as a spell checker, right? Or, check their grammar, yeah, they'll use it a little bit or use it for fun. And I'll kind of get to this is we lived through the internet. So, and I saw what I missed when the internet came about. And I heard all the same stuff that I hear with AI. Oh, it's going to be bad. It's going to cause this. It's going to hurt this person. It's going to make this business go away. Well, none of it came true. Okay. What happened was productivity for individuals that were experts in their fields went through the roof. And I think that's what you're going to see with AI in the next 5 years. I don't think it's a problem for people who are experts in their field because they're just going to become more experts. They're going to become even like someone like myself in finance. I now would be the equivalent of a doctorate, right? Because I know how to ask the questions and how to push back on AI and how to answer questions. I didn't have that tool 3 years ago, right? But where now I do, right? So now if someone comes in and says, here's what AI said, I said, that's great, but you didn't ask it this question, or you didn't say this, or AI is going to agree with you 100% of the time. So you've kind of let it go down the path of becoming a sycophant, and now it's agreeing with you when in reality, I could take it down the same exact path and disagreeing. So my point is those of us who are experts in our field will just become more. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And that's, to your question that you originally answered, what would I tell my younger self? And it is building that agency and building that expertise that I was kind of alluding to in order to just have your own individuality, your own repertoire of stuff that you can definitely talk about. And I accidentally did it, just practicing medicine for the last 20 years. And that's basically what I told my parents was that I was going to be a doctor when I grew up, or be something in medicine. And that was always my plan. So I think that now with the limitless amount of information that we have with AI, and then obviously it probably felt like that. I was 10 in the 90s, so I didn't really play too much on the computer, and it was mostly just games, that kind of stuff, or listen to music, just like I guess a lot of people are doing with AI right now that are younger, not taking it seriously. But I think with the advent of social media as well, it's easier for you to go down into a tunnel and be around people that feel the exact same way and not get different perspectives than it ever was. There's lots of people that I've seen as patients who, they don't really get out of the house or do much. They don't socialize, as much as we were forced to, I guess, when we were younger because we didn't have anything else to do. People will sit there and just be in their echo chamber, and social media kind of feeds that because whatever they're looking at, they're going to get more of. So it's easier to go into that echo chamber a lot more now than it ever was. So that means it's easier for you to continue to affirm whatever the wrong conclusion is. And that's definitely, something that you see with politics, with health, with whatever, because your algorithm.
Finance, everything in life. It's real easy to just get yourself stuck in some place. And it goes back to because they're not curious. I just find it fascinating. I'm like, why don't you just ask 5 or 6 people questions? And it doesn't mean you got to agree with them. It's just be curious.
Yeah, exactly. And, and people, for the most part, what I've seen is it's easy for people to say, explain to me or give me some structured points if they're talking to AI, why my theory of this and this are correct. And it'll give you some things that probably somewhat affirm your theory, but people don't look on the other side like, why wouldn't this be the correct way to go? What things am I missing? What
it will literally agree with you. Like
yeah.
that is like I get in debates with people. I'm real active in AI, and people will talk about kind of AI is going to take over the world. And I said, no. It can't take over the world until they do something totally different with it, because there's one problem AI has, and it's the sycophant. It will always agree with you 100% of the time if you ask enough questions. And that's why I try to tell people when they start messing with AI, I'm like, just stay hyper focused on what you're an expert in, because then you immediately know that it's telling you the wrong thing, right? So like my doctor, I'm really good friends with her. So I talk to her and I'll go in with these ideas and she'll say, no. Right.
Yeah.
So, but not very many people have that relationship, right? So they think it's kind of here's the answer. But my point is I see it when it gives bad financial advice or bad financial answers for an individual. You see it when it gives bad medicine advice because you're an expert in medicine. And that's the thing that I try to really emphasize with people. I say, just leverage what you know. Don't try to think, okay, well, because I don't know medicine, I think I'll go use AI to become an expert in medicine, because you're going to end up down some crazy path that you're going to just be wrong.
Yeah. And, I still think that it has its use. You have to
Yeah, no
you have your own,
question.
you have your own agency and be able to
Yes.
discern what things are BS, what things are actually legitimate. And if you do it to help schedule your life, to help, reorganize some of the patterns, like I was talking about earlier, the things that you've long held beliefs, and just try to re-investigate that. And that, I think, is one of the things that you're talking about with wealthy people, is that they revisit and they, kind of live their life in a way that they can re-examine their previous beliefs, or whatever it is, if it's finance or if it's health. If they had one conclusion, they test it, and then test it after they've implemented some kind of solution or some sort of treatment. Then did that work or did that not work? And that's, basically just a scientific method to be able to tell whether or not the thing that they're doing is good for them or if it's bad for them. But lots of other people will just say, well, someone told me that I need to be doing this, so I just do it. I'm like, okay, but why are you doing that? And then
They don't know.
Like,
No, it
I don't
goes
know.
to seek counsel. But one of the things, I have a really good friend who has 3 or 4 children, and he tries to tell them kind of what he does. And I said, you got to quit doing that. I said, that's the sign of someone who's not comfortable kind of where you are. And again, I'm nice about it. So this isn't like beating up someone, but I said, the thing is, the only thing I really know is wealth, right? I mean, money, right? So again, I'm not, there's other parts of my life that are fine, but the piece that I'm an expert in is money. So I'll use money as my example, but it's not what everyone needs to hyper focus on. So I just want to kind of clarify that. But on the money part, what people do is, if you meet someone who's a trust baby that's had money their whole lives, okay, and that just grew up with money, they're 3rd, 4th generation with money, they don't teach their children what they know, okay, because they don't know anything. Right? They're really not expert. I mean, and I don't mean that negatively. They don't, right? I mean, what have they done, right? I mean, they've kind of grown up with a silver spoon and they've gone through, but they know that, right? So they're very careful about sharing what they know, because they don't know anything, because people like you and I, who have kind of started with nothing and built up, we think what we know is really of value. So we try to teach that to our children. What they teach their children is how to hire and fire. And if you watch them, they're really good at hiring people like me, people like you, they're CPAs, they're lawyers. housekeepers, they're really, really good at it. And they do it from a very young age. Sometimes they do it with no finesse. Other times they do it where they have a lot of finesse, but they're still really good at kind of what I would call hiring and firing. And I'm oversimplifying that word, but that's because that's what they were taught. Where people like us who grow up kind of from the bootstraps. In fact, we think what we learn. I want my daughter to know everything about what I know, right? Well, she has no interest in it. Yeah, I can't teach
Yeah.
her how do I teach her that? Because it's just not her, it's not who she is. It's not her interest.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a couple different things on that. And, on the health side of things. So first, that's the reason that I work out. Well, one of the reasons that I work out every day. I have my own schedule of how I do things. And I know people are like, well, working out every day is too much. It's actually, I found that it's the most sustainable way to stay in shape is if you work out every day. And when I say work out, it doesn't mean like I'm running a marathon every day. It means that I focus on my body daily for about an
Right.
hour. If it's just a sauna, a stretch session, that kind of stuff, then I do all those things. But also, with fitness, I think it's important to be my company's called GymRx, to be the person who is the example. And I do that with my kids. I do that with my patients and my peers. If I show that I respect my body by staying in shape, then, the people that are around me, especially my kids who see me every day, luckily, thankful for that. They get to see, an example of what you should or could achieve with your body if you put in the work and get there. And that's kind of, how I explain it to my kids without having to actually explain it to them later on when they grow up. Hopefully they want to ask questions about it. But right now they see me going to work out and they're like, can I go on a run with you? Or can I go work out in the gym? And obviously
That's
they're,
wonderful.
6 months to 10 years old. They don't do too much, but like, all right, do some push-ups and then you do some squats. And then we're going to rotate out on the treadmill, the row machine and the ski erg or whatever. So they're interested in it because I'm interested in it.
Right.
And I've kind of set that model. And the same thing with patients, obviously in a different context because they're not my kids. But when I show up and have a presence where I look like I take
Work
care of my
out.
body, then it's easier for them to listen to any of the advice that I'm giving, and it's easier for me to say it because I don't feel like I'm trying to hide anything or trying to tell them to do something that I would never do, which is back to the military aspect. One of the first things that we learn is don't ask anybody to do something that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. And then on the other side of the coin, again, you're talking about people who are wealthy and they don't know anything. They don't say anything because they haven't experienced any much anyways, other than opulence and, the lifestyle that they lead. I think one of the other interesting aspects of that is people on social media who, if you've ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which just means that a person who has limited knowledge thinks they know everything about a certain subject. I think we have a lot of those people out there
Oh,
that are,
I have heard of that. They talk
yeah,
about that one professor is like, there's like three or four people on the internet who are like doctors in space, and they give advice on politics. It's like
yeah,
that's really not your expertise.
exactly. But they heard a podcast or they asked AI one day, and all of a sudden they became an expert on whatever thing it is. But they have the level of confidence to make other people who have lower confidence believe that they actually know what they're talking
That's
about.
right. Oh my gosh, it's rampant.
Yeah,
So I guess a good way to kind of finish this up for someone who's listening to it and I hope what you're hearing is have a plan, health plan, financial plan. I mean, have some plan where you kind of know where you're at and then where you want to go. I think that's just incredibly important. I think you need to have some balance in life, right? I mean, that's kind of the diversity. And then using experts or seeking counsel, like I use in the book, is going to become more and more important as we get farther down this path of AI. Not less and less important. That's the one thing that I think people are missing. I think that they think AI is going to give them answers. In reality, you're going to need more and more expertise, not less and less expertise, or access to expertise is an example, right? I mean, so are you using your gym primarily in person? Are you doing any online? Kind of give me just kind of an overview of your business as we kind of wrap up on
yeah,
the call.
yeah. So GymRx eventually is going to get to have its own gym. Right now, I'm looking at people that I can actually partner with who have more personal training type gym that want access to the kind of labs that I have, and the labs that I have are genetics, nutrient panels so we can replace all the nutrients and things that you need for your body, create you a custom supplement based on your genetics. We do all that and create you workout programs based off of, what you respond to the best. So some people respond to cardio, some people respond to strength training better. It's just based off of your genetics and obviously what you desire to have as the outcome for your body. I think most people obviously want to get rid of fat and get more muscle. We can do that. And, to the other side of things, if we focus on longevity, which I think, most primary carers and people that you see don't really focus on is, what are you going to look like when you're 70 or 80, rather than just, are you okay right now? Are there any problems for me to just fix right now? But actually go looking for the future problems, just like you, I'm sure, do with financial planning is, okay, where are you at right now? And then where are you projected to be in about a year based off of the trends that I'm seeing in your financial analysis? Same thing with health.
Yep.
Where you're at right now, and based off of your epigenetic score, your genetic score, your telomere length, all these different markers that we check, where do I think that you're going to be in, 20, 30 years? So
I'd be nervous. I
yeah.
don't want you to stop there, but I'd be nervous to know some of that. What are
Yeah.
the people? That would be my single biggest concern is I'm not sure I want to know. And that goes to my point of I need to be self-aware where that's one of the things I'm not sure I want to know that. What do you run into that with clients or not so?
Yeah.
I
I mean,
guess if they're seeking you out, they probably want to know.
there's some clients, obviously no one wants to look under the mattress and see like what's been going on under there that I've been neglecting for a certain period of time. But, just like, when people come to you and they are in, maybe if they're not in the best financial situation, they don't want to look at their bank statement. It's the same kind of
Yeah,
deal.
no, that's a good analogy.
They know that it's probably not good and they haven't checked it because they have anxiety about it. But at the end of the day, the anxiety of doing the thing is usually the worst part of actually doing the thing. It's the same way when I used to jump out of planes. I always got super anxious because I don't even like heights, but I've jumped out of a plane close to 1,000 times. And every single time before we were going up in the airplane, I got butterflies in my stomach. I'm rethinking about all the stuff that might or might not happen. And then once I jump into the air, I don't have
Fine.
any anxiety anymore. It's just a freeing feeling of like, I know what I'm in for. And at the very, at the very least, if in 1 minute and 30 seconds, when I get to the ground, it could be faster, it could be slow, but this is going to be over. I've already made my decision. But with health, obviously we don't do it that way. It's, you need to just see what's going on and see what obstacles you can avoid in the future. We also do cancer screening, the full body MRI stuff. So a litany of tools that we have at our disposal to make sure
And
that.
how much money should they plan? So if they reach out to you, what would be like a kind of a range for what they would expect to pay?
Each plan is personalized based off of what your goals are and what things you want to investigate. Obviously, I'll go over all of the offerings and the things that we can do. And then if your focus is like right now, I have a lot of guys who are just healthy. They're not taking any medications, but they're like, well, I have these joint aches and I have to do my job as a police officer or prison guard or whatever. So I just need help with that right now. So obviously we do just a normal panel of labs for that. And then, I can get them peptides or get them on a supplement protocol to help out with that. And, the bottom line cost for those kind of things is around $500. And then if you're like, I'm really worried about my mom and my dad had cancer and heart attack, and we have this and that in the family, then it would be a much more comprehensive plan of we're going to do your MRI, we're going to do your genetics, we're going to do your cancer screening, we're going to do your hormones, your peptides, and all of your labs, and that can get up to around 4,000 a month. So it just depends on how far the person wants to go. And I think we kept on talking about the AI stuff, but I think the part with hiring somebody that is becoming more prominent is that you have to go with someone that you trust and you feel like is actually going to look out for you, listen to you, even if you have objections, because there's people that are like, well, why are you doing this and why are you doing that? And obviously I explain every single step of everything that I'm doing or why I would want to implement it, the time frame that we implement a medication, because there's no medication that I think people should be on for the rest of their life if you can avoid it, other than me, because I don't have a thyroid. So I have to take thyroid medication because I don't produce that in my body. But obviously there's certain situations, but for the most part, I wouldn't want anybody to be on a chronic medication for a chronic condition that's like reflux or type 2 diabetes, those kind of things that you can make a difference with. just, the way that you're eating, the way that you're working out, and some of the other adjuncts that we have that are short-lived. So that's kind of how I look at health in general. Is your body wants to do the things that are going to make you healthy, but we need to release all the toxins, like we do toxin screenings too, and we need to make sure that there's nothing that's inhibiting it from doing the things that it should do. And if there's nutrients or materials that it needs to create things, then obviously we replace those so your body can function at least as close to 100% as possible.
And then what would be your kind of commitment? A year is a typical commitment. Like if they engage you, come in, that would probably be kind of the minimal, right? I mean, you just kind of expect to go through.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, typically, unless it's something that like, I just want to get strength and, I want to look good for this wedding that I have coming up or whatever, something easy like that. Obviously, I'm not going to say, all right, you need to sign up for a year or anything like that. But if it's something where we're doing a full protocol on you and we're doing all the stuff that I talked about, then it's typically around a year. And that's mostly because, we're looking at the seasonality of life. There's a lot of things that we repeat throughout the year.
Oh, good point.
The parties, the, summer vacations, the fall when people usually get sick or you get sick again around February, flu season lasts through that entire time. So the things that happen throughout life that we repeat. And my goal isn't to have, a person on that same program for the rest of their life for $4,000 or whatever, but through every appointment, we go through every single thing that worked, didn't work, and what's going on in your life. And then at the end, I give you a full report, like this is what we did. This is the problems that you had during this time and that time. And this is what we did to fix it. And this is what you can take to the bank every single time, for the next couple of years. And I'm happy to see you, but you've, graduated from the program and now you know the things that you need to know about your body, because most people, like you said, are kind of fearful of what they'll find if they go looking under the mattress and look at their labs. But
yeah, no, I would be. I am.
but none of that stuff is scary. And, I hope that, when I go into these conversations, I mean, just going back to my vascular surgery days, when I would go into a patient's room, we replaced people's aortas or we had to amputate their legs, those kind of things. So I never want a person to have those conversations with a clinician. And, if we frame it in that aspect, not to necessarily scare you or the person about what is going to happen, but we want people to enter their 80s and 90s and be able to do the things that they love and not have to be working around these illnesses that, it's a chronic condition, meaning that it's been happening for the last 40 years and you haven't done anything about it because like we were talking about before, we just didn't know what questions to ask, or we were too scared to ask the questions because we might not like the answer.
Yeah,
but
no, that's a good point.
If you steer course correct a little bit earlier, like I was saying earlier, it's harder to course correct once you've been going down the wrong path for such a long time. But ask the question earlier and it'll be a lot easier to course correct. And hopefully it's just habits, diet, peptides, those kind of things that we can do to fix it, rather than having to get to the point where we have to replace your aorta or put a graft in there or, amputate. So you can, and at that point, the life expectancy definitely decreases by 30% per limb ish. So we don't want people to get to that point. We want you to look at your health as early as possible. If it's the year long or if it's six month program, then I'm happy to help with whatever way that I can. Obviously each individual person is an individual. So I don't treat everyone with, this is the thing that you have to do, and then just have people do it blindly. Everything is explained and everything is specifically made for you. So that's how I do it.
That's fantastic. So to finish up, why don't you give us kind of how do they get in contact with you and all that information?
Sure. You can always contact me on my email, brian.silva@gymrx.fit. And then the website is gymrx.fit. Starting up on social media now. And then also soon to be a podcast called the Resilience Medicine Podcast, where I go a lot more in depth. I'll show you all the labs and everything that I'm doing, because I'm an open book with all this stuff. It really took me, 5-6 years of doing this to help heal myself. Because, after 8 deployments, almost 1,000 times jumping out of a plane and carrying heavy rucks and being around burn pits and lots of other toxins, I had my own hormonal and, like I said, thyroid issues that I've been trying to solve for myself, or have solved for myself. And, I just want people to get on that journey and do what they need to do to make sure that they also solve the problems that they've been dealing with for a long time. And it's the last thing I'll say is I saw this social media post that kind of like made me realize, like, this is the best thing that I could be doing with my time and my life, and spending, and be grateful for the kids that I have, the time that I have to spend with people like you who are awesome out there trying to do the best that they can and help people as much in the world. Is, one day we're all going to wake up, or one of us, we're going to wake up and we're going to realize that we have a lot of tasks to do and lots of things to do, but there's things that we're not going to finish, and we need to enjoy life because that might be our last day. So you're going to try and go fix a thing in the garage, and then it's going to be over. So, not to scare anybody, but I think it's just important to do what you can right now while we have the time and we have the intellectual capacity to be able to facilitate change the way that we want it. So take hold of your life, just like I'm sure you tell people to take hold of their finances,
Yep,
and
same thing.
make the change that's necessary.
Well, good. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Brian. I appreciate it. And this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. I appreciate you taking the time to go through it and give us some insights.
Of course, thank you for having me on, and
Thank you.
hopefully we meet up in the future at the 1 million Cup stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Thanks.